Out of all the things I've tried and all the things I've learned and all the habits that I've adopted throughout my personal development journey, there is one that sticks out above the rest, and that is the philosophy and the habit of Kaizen. Now, if you don't know what Kaizen is, let me tell you what it is by telling you the story of how it came about. The approach and philosophy of Kaizen is popularly credited to Toyota in post-World War II Japan, who many people say was the first to implement, at least on a large scale, the philosophy of Kaizen, which is also known as the philosophy of continuous improvement. Essentially, Kai means change and Zen means good. The philosophy of Kaizen proposes that things done consistently over time eventually yield exponential results. In other words, focusing on getting just 1% better every single day creates exponential results down the road. If you're an NBA fan or a basketball fan at all, this is very similar to what Kobe Bryant described as the Black Mamba mentality of just focusing on getting better today than you were yesterday and doing that every single day until you can look back 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now and realize what that Black Mamba mentality or that Kaizen philosophy has yielded you. Now, there is a lot more to this concept of Kaizen, like, for example, reducing waste within a company. But for the purposes of this video, let's just talk about why the philosophy of Kaizen is important and how we can use it to better our lives. First reason that Kaizen is important is that the philosophy of Kaizen transforms your life by improving it just one step at a time. This philosophy of getting just 1% better each and every day teaches us that progress doesn't have to be dramatic to be meaningful. Boring can be good, and success is often boring. Success is often just the product of doing the same boring things over and 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 over again. When you make small improvements consistently over time, that yields exponential results, which, as you can see in these two graphs, is different than linear results. So the person that's able to be patient and continue putting in the boring work consistently will eventually see that hockey stick result. What trips a lot of people up, and the reason that a lot of people quit, is that we expect success to be linear, but success is oftentimes exponential. And if we expect it to be linear, we will just get demotivated and not withstand the flat line of the exponential curve until we hit the hockey stick portion. The second reason is that Kaizen encourages long-term thinking. When we focus on the here and now and we just focus on getting just 1% better today, being better today than we were yesterday, ironically, when we focus on the present, we end up having a long-term perspective. Because when we're focusing on the present with a Kaizen mentality that understands that things will take time, we're able to just focus on today while keeping a perspective of the long term, understanding that it takes a little bit of time to start seeing results, and understanding that if we do the right things consistently over time, those results will eventually come. And so as a result of this long-term thinking, we don't get tripped up by the day-to-day obstacles that we're inevitably going to face. And because we have a long-term perspective, we don't quit if we're not seeing any results after a short amount of time. This kind of mentality helps us develop discipline and resilience and patience, which are all attributes that we have to have if we want to achieve our goals. And also, this kind of long-term thinking just makes you overall happier because you can just focus on the today, on the here and now, focus on the work that you're doing now without being bogged down by it has to happen right now, I have to achieve the thing right now. And so as a result of having this long-term thinking, you're not burdened by the day-to-day drama and the day-to-day pettiness that many of us can fall into when we have short-term thinking. Third reason that Kaizen is important is that it cultivates a growth mindset. Now, if you haven't seen the video that I made about growth mindset versus fixed mindset, essentially summarizing a lot of Carol Dweck's famous book, Mindset, then I'll link that right here. But essentially, a growth mindset is one that looks at failures and successes as the result of our work to date. So for example, if you're in 5th grade and you fail a math test, you might conclude, if you have a fixed mindset, I am not good at math. But if you have a growth mindset, you conclude, I can get better at math. And having that kind of growth mindset of focusing on getting better today than you were yesterday yields much better results than a fixed mindset that always trips up every single time it fails. And instead of saying, I failed, the person with the fixed mindset concludes I am a failure and therefore just stops altogether. Whereas by contrast, the person with the growth mindset says there is room for growth. Do I want to grow in this area? If yes, then continue moving forward. If no, then pivot to something else. The fourth reason that Kaizen is a really nice philosophy to adopt is that it cultivates faith. The philosophy of Kaizen teaches us that things are changing underneath the surface, even if if we can't see them changing. And so while we're on that flat line of the exponential curve, the philosophy of Kaizen helps give us faith that eventually it will start to turn into that hockey stick figure. And finally, Kaizen builds resilience because when we have faith that the hockey stick figure will eventually start to take shape, we are much more resilient during the flat line period. Now that we've gone over why Kaizen is important, let's go into the 7 action steps that we can start taking today to start implementing the Kaizen mentality and Kaizen philosophy into our lives. The first is to test small changes. Remember that the Kaizen philosophy is about getting just 1% better today than you were yesterday. We are not trying to build a skyscraper all at once. Rather, we're trying to lay the brick today, the brick tomorrow, the bricks the next day, and so on and so forth. And so often when we try to have this dramatic, explosive growth, we end up feeling either overwhelmed and or let down when that explosive, dramatic growth doesn't happen. That kind of frustration and letdown doesn't really happen when we're focusing on just small day-to-day changes. And also, it's important to remember that small changes can yield big results. And so by testing small changes, we can get a big bang for our buck. The second action step goes in line with the first one, which is to test one change at a time. When we're changing a bunch of things at once, even if we yield good results, it's very hard to attribute the results to the specific change or changes that we made because we made so many of them. But when we change one thing at a time, we know exactly what kind of results we're getting from that one specific change. The third also goes in line with the first two, which is to test changes for a long enough period of time so you can actually see the results. Sometimes when we make a change, we expect to see the results in a couple of days or a week or a couple of weeks, and oftentimes changes take longer than that for us to be able to see results. So what I personally like to do is I like to engage in 90-day challenges in which I challenge myself to do something every single day for 90 days. The reason I pick 90 days is because in my mind, it might take 30 days to build a habit, but it takes 90 days to build a lifestyle. At least that's how I look at it. And the way I also look at it is that if I do something for 90 days, that should give me enough time for me to be able to start seeing the real results of that change that I'm making. And so these 90-day challenges can be anything. They can be 15 minutes of exercise in the morning. If you did that every morning for 90 days, can you imagine how much fitter and healthier you would be? It can be to take your supplements every morning. If you did that every day, can you imagine how much healthier and sharper in your mind you would be? It could be 15 minutes of meditation in the morning every day. If you did that every day for 90 days, can you imagine at the end of the 90 days how much calmer you would be? It could be reading a book for 30 minutes every night before bed. If you did that, let's say for years, because that's kind of what we're trying to do with 90-day challenges, is build a lifestyle that we carry forward for years to come. If you were to read 30 minutes every night, can you imagine over years how much knowledge and wisdom you would gain and how that knowledge and that wisdom would compound with each other? Again, going back to that exponential return that I was talking about earlier. Can you imagine how you would feel at the end of a 90-day no social media challenge? Would you feel less social anxiety? Would you feel less peer pressure? Would you feel less anxiety overall? Would you be happier? Would you be freer? Would your dopamine receptors get reset? Or imagine if you decided to work 1 to 2 hours on your business every single day, or even almost every single day for a few years. Would you find yourself in a state of financial freedom? And so the point of these 90-day challenges is that you tell yourself that you are going to do something for 90 days and you give yourself the ability to stop doing the thing after the 90 days. And so what that does is it helps you when it gets tough during the 90 days. It helps you to say, okay, well, I can just stop at the end of the 90 days if I really, really want to. And so that helps you keep going. But what eventually ends up happening is that by the end of the 90 days, it's become so ingrained of you, it's become such a lifestyle that you just don't want to stop. And if it's truly not for you, then you probably will stop at the end of the 90 days. The fourth is to reflect and adjust. I kind of was just talking about this right at the very end of number 3, but once you, for example, reach the end of the 90 days, you want to reflect and you want to see, was this actually worth it? Do I want to keep doing this? Did I find myself to be happier? Did I find myself to be healthier? Did I find myself to be less stressed out all the time? And if the answer is yes, there was positive results, you probably want to keep doing that thing if the thing that you're doing is not requiring an insane amount of effort. If the return on your investment is there, you probably want to keep doing that thing, especially because you've already been doing it for 90 days. So it's going to be much easier to keep doing it because you've already been doing it for so long. You're not starting anew. And so if you've already been doing it for 90 days, you want to take advantage of that momentum that you have ingrained in you instead of quitting after the 90 days of work that you put in and then having to restart again. But if that thing that you tried is actually not for you, then you can adjust and pivot and try something else. And just because it wasn't for you doesn't mean that it was a waste of time, because you can start to reflect and think, why wasn't this for me? What could be for me instead? And so you will learn through that process, even if you don't keep that new habit or lifestyle that you're trying to adopt after the 90 days. The fifth action step is to celebrate small wins. Remember that Kaizen is all about little wins, little improvements, small improvements continuously done over time that yield great results. And so, as I mentioned before, something that really trips us up is that in the beginning, we're seeing absolutely no results. And our brain likes to think, no matter how much we tell it otherwise, our brain likes to think that progress and success is supposed to be linear. And so during that flat line, if we can celebrate the small wins along the way, even if they don't seem like much, it will help us get through that period of time. And if you're having trouble celebrating the small wins or just celebrating wins in general, then you can always go to a friend and they can help you celebrate for you, and that will rub off on you until you start saying, you know what, I should celebrate this. And another way, instead of going to a friend, is to pretend that whatever small win you achieved was achieved by one of your friends, and think to yourself, how would I respond if that friend had achieved this small win? And the response is probably going to be that you would celebrate it. And once you realize that, you're going to think to yourself, well, if I'm the one that achieved it, why shouldn't I celebrate it? And so that starts to shift your paradigm, and it makes it easier for you to start celebrating your small victories. The sixth action step that I can offer you to start practicing and ingraining this habit of Kaizen in your life is to practice mindfulness and practice staying in the present moment. I have been meditating for 10 to 15 minutes every morning for a few years now, and it has been one of the best habits that I've adopted, which, by the way, it started out as a 90-day challenge. I've just found that, particularly if I do it in the morning, it sets me up for the rest of the day, and it makes my life so much more peaceful, so much more calm, and so much more enjoyable. When I have that habit in my daily routine, it makes it a lot easier for me to not get pulled in 1,000 different directions, to not get pulled by the fear of the future, what may or may not happen. I'm much better able to stay in the present moment and appreciate the work that I'm doing now, and have faith that the work done consistently over time is going to eventually yield results. And the last way to ingrain the philosophy of Kaizen in your life is to stop comparing yourself to others. Many people out there are flashing, but few are actually building. Let me repeat that again, because it is so true. Many are flashing, few are building. And when you are one of the few that is building, and you are seeing so many people flashing, pretending like they got it made, while you are out here building and you're still in that flat line of the hockey stick, it can be incredibly discouraging. So it's very important for us to just mind our business and build. Put your head down for a few years and then look up. And you might realize once you look back up after a few years that those people that were flashing are still flashing in the same way, or they're not even flashing at all anymore. And then you'll contrast that with where you are today versus where you were a couple of years ago, and you will see the massive improvement that you have made and the zero or negative improvement that the flashers have made. But you won't get there if you don't just mind your business. Now, if you enjoyed this video on my favorite habit that I've adopted in my personal development journey, I think you'll really enjoy this video on the 10 habits of highly productive people. And as always, if you like this content and want to see more of it, make sure you subscribe to the channel and click the link in the description below to sign up for my weekly email newsletter, where I send you content like this every week, every Monday via email to get you started for the week. Other than that, I'll see you in the next video.